Welcome everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today for the Sage HRMS Comprehensive Customizable HR Software webinar. So my name is Stephanie Scioli. I am a Customer Success Manager over at BrainSell. And I also wanted to introduce Joe Rotella, who's the Chief Value Officer at Delphia. And also on the line, we have Brian Delphia, who is the President of Delphia. So we're just going to jump into a few housekeeping items. This is going to be a 45-minute presentation with a 15-minute question and answer session at the end. You can type questions into the question box to submit them throughout the presentation. And we'll send you a copy of the deck recording of the webinar in follow-up emails after the event.
Perfect. And I just wanted to do a quick survey to get us. What HR software are you using today? Maybe you have office applications like Excel and Word, or maybe you're using payroll software and that captures some of your demographics. Maybe you're using Sage HRMS. Maybe you're using HRMS from another publisher. So I'm just curious what you're using today. If you could get some of those votes in there, then I can see. Now remember, today our plan is to show you Sage HRMS. So that's what's very exciting. Sue noticed my background allows for some mystery. It does, because the room is so messy. So messy. Okay, about 70% of you have voted. Get some more votes in there, but in the interest of time, I'm going to close out the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's just see what folks said. Well, check this out, Stephanie. 60% of folks are using applications like Excel and Word. 60% say their payroll software manages some HR data. Oh, about a fifth of you are using HRMS, and a fifth of you are using an HRMS from another publisher. Very cool.
Wow.
So we'll use that to guide our discussion.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Joe.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. And I'm going to close out my camera so my mystery background is gone. And that way you have more room to see the actual slides. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to start with Sage HRMS, kind of a big picture overview. And we've put together a little COVID-19 return to work example to just show you how customizable Sage HRMS is and how quickly that can be done. That's going to kind of give you the big picture feel of HRMS, and then we're going to kind of walk the employment lifecycle. We're going to do some recruiting and onboarding, then show you how we can manage benefits and reporting around benefits, and we'll dive into benefits enrollment. We'll talk about compensation management, then we'll talk about performance management, and we'll compare two different approaches, the traditional approach to the progressive approach. I'm going to recap, and then we'll share some opportunities where you can learn more and even some additional resources. As Stephanie mentioned, I'm joined today by Brian Delphia, the President of Delphia Consulting. And so he's going to handle the demo portion. I'm going to handle some of the lecture portion. So with that, let's just dive right in. Sage HRMS is what's called a best of breed platform. That means you really select the modules that are right for you. And sometimes those modules will come directly from Sage, like the core HR module, right? Sage HRMS, that's published by Sage. Sometimes they'll come from ISV solution providers. That's why we're here today. Delphia Consulting has written more add-ons for Sage HRMS than any other company in the world. And we have more endorsed solutions than anyone else. Endorsed means kind of like Sage's Good Housekeeping seal of approval, except it's from Sage, right? Sometimes you'll use modules that come completely outside of the Sage ecosphere, and that's okay too, because these things are all designed to kind of work together with that core HRM module, the strategy one right in the middle. And if you look at some of our topics around the edge, recruiting and onboarding, time and attendance, payroll, performance management, and so on, they all center around that core HRMS, but they cover all aspects of human capital management. Whenever you're in this situation, a best of breed platform, your business partner is the key to your success. So in this case, BrainSell is who you go to. If you have questions, if you need a hand, BrainSell is there to help. Now, one of the things that we like to see and talk about is the data, kind of the data modeling perspective of an HR system. Sage HRMS really is the place for employee data. If you're familiar with any sort of information architecture techniques, you've probably heard the terms single source of truth, SSOT, or single point of truth. This really says that for every data element, think of it like a piece of data, a field, it's mastered or edited in only one place. One thing, one application owns that data. Now it can share it out to as many other places as you like, but one place really owns it. When you have this kind of approach, you really ensure that everyone's making decisions based on the same data, and it avoids duplicate data entry. And we know that there are errors associated with that, right? Where you have data in multiple places, people are trying to keep it in sync in multiple places, and it gets out of whack, out of sync, and you never know what you can trust. When we add on top of that employee and manager self-service, well, now you're saving time and saving money. And I just think it's what people like to do, especially in the last couple years. You know, I haven't left the house much because of the pandemic. I do all my shopping online. I can research, I can order, I can ship, I can track, I can even send an e-card 24/7. I don't have to touch paper. It's all electronic. Self-service also gives folks more accurate data, and it's more transparent. If you allow them to make changes and say, here's my new address, I've added a dependent, I have a new life event, well, then you're increasing your information accuracy. And employees really like the ability to get on the web and see things like, oh, how many vacation days left do I have left? And how much did I take? And when did I take it? And of course, self-service means we eliminate duplicate data entry. You don't have someone filling out a form and then you go and key it in somewhere, or they're typing it in one place and like a online application and then going in and typing again when you have to add them to HRMS. Now, I'd just like to get a feel of how many folks are in your organization, because that'll help us judge, you know, some of the things we'll focus on. So how many folks are in your organization? Do you have 1 to 14 folks, 15 to 19, 20 to 49, 50 to 99, or 100 or more? Wow, you voted fast this time. So you guys are super fast. Thanks so much. Let me show you what we have. So we have no one with under 19 employees, but 20 to 49, about 17%. About a third of you are in that 50 to 99 range, and half of you have 100 or more employees. Well, that's why it's really important for you to download that handout called Federal Labor Requirements. It's in the handouts portion of the GoToWebinar control panel. It's going to show you what regulations or acts you have to comply with based on how many employees you have. So I think that'll be really handy for you. We'll cover parts of some of those regs when we mention compliance here in today's webinar. So when we think about Sage HRMS, it's configurable. You can customize the menus. You can add your own fields to HRMS. Sometimes those are single data elements, sometimes what they call multi-row. So single would be one field. Are you vaccinated? Yes or no. Multi-row would be, when have you gotten tested for COVID? That would be the date and then the results of the test. And you can imagine multiple rows in that table. We can also build user-definable forms and workflows. Workflow is kind of the routing slip at the bottom of a form. It's comprehensive. It covers all the boxes you saw in that footprint. Again, it's modular. You only license what you need. And that means Sage HRMS can grow and change as your organization changes over time. So in talking with Brian, I said, you know, COVID-19 is so hot right now. We have new OSHA requirements coming out with vaccination status and routine testing. That's very employee-centric data. The place to track that, ideally, is not just some spreadsheet somewhere, and you have to worry about someone accessing that and confidentiality and HIPAA, things like that, but in a secure, employee-centric database, which is Sage HRMS. So Brian built an example for us in under 60 minutes, I think. These are all the different things that it touched, but rather than talk about it, Brian, can you show us, and how long did it take, and give us an idea what it was like?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Very good. Well, I did this live on a webcast a few weeks ago, and I think I did it in 19 minutes, which is amazing because the first time it did take me about an hour. But I guess the second time around it goes a little quicker. So I'm just launching into Sage HRMS. Let me, while that's coming up, let me just show you the things that I did here. One of my favorite things about Sage HRMS.
Brian, we're still seeing your slides.
Oh, thank you. So one of my favorite things about Sage HRMS is its ability to adapt to either external realities as things change. Who knew we might need a tracking mechanism for COVID vaccinations 4 or 5 years ago, right? Or as your business changes, or just unique aspects of your business. So it enables you to add to the database by extending the footprint of data so you'd have that single point of truth. First thing I'm going to show you is under Setup and System. You can go through and you can tell the system that I want to create these custom pick lists, custom code tables is how they refer to them. And for this example, I've created several. A status code table of COVID vaccinations, which is like Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, and a weekly COVID testing result. All right, so that's the first thing you do is you just say, hey, I want to build these code tables. Then you're able to go to System or Set up Employee, and you're actually able to build or add the pick lists to your code table. So here, I'll just look at one of them. If I wanted to look at my COVID status, I've made it to where I'm cleared to go to work. I need to isolate. I'm like one of the 593 unfortunate people at United Airlines. They're subject to termination because they're refusing. And the weekly testing is required, is what one of the statuses. So these are just pick lists. Well, what do you do with those pick lists? Well, what I did with them is I created a page. So under Setup and System, and this is really the crux of my favorite part of this, I was able to create a custom page. So HRMS has a whole bunch of fields, just about everything you need to track about your employees, but I added the first dose date, the second dose, the booster date, what type of vaccine, and what my status is. Now, this is just a page definition, so I could easily come out here, and if I just had the core HRMS, that's all that made sense perhaps, then I could get out of this. I could go over here to my employees, pull up a person.
And Brian, if we just pause there for a second, you can really see how this is really a database all about employee-centric data, right? There's a whole list of employees here. There's a whole bunch of tabs and stuff across the top. But when he picks one employee, here's their demographic information, they have their job and pay, their benefits, and then this is the custom piece that you just added, right, Brian?
Exactly. So here, I don't have anything for Rocky yet, but since we don't, we probably should have their status as being isolate because we don't know, right? So they shouldn't be around other people until we know their status. So I'll go ahead and apply. So you could update this information manually. Another thing you could do is you could extend the footprint of HRMS by leveling up and adding one of our favorite modules, HR Actions. This is a paperless forms module that does everything from requisitions to hire and new hire forms and pay statuses, terminations, performance appraisals. It's really meant to get you to be paperless. But as an individual, I could pull up an action, and I could start an action for myself, and I can go into my COVID return to work status, and I could come through here and say, you know what, I was lucky enough, I'm over 65, I got the booster. I got it yesterday. So I could put in my booster date for the Pfizer vaccine, and I could initiate that action. Now, the other thing that's nice about HR Actions, I mean, you just notice that the fields I just added to HRMS are now available to build a form to capture the data, but reporting on the data is just as important. So for example, when you create a custom details page in Sage HRMS HR Analytics, the reporting vehicle, knows about that new page and it automatically creates a report. So here's the COVID vaccine status report that it was automatically created. And we'll see two things here. One was for Veronica Bell. I have it. The report's not reflecting the data for booster date because that action hasn't been saved yet. So let me just take 2 seconds to do that, and then we'll come back and do this report. So if I go to action status, HR Actions allows you to track where the paperwork is, I put that in air quotes, as it routes to the organization, which is, you can imagine, not an easy task to do in a paper-based world. But I'm just going ahead and approving this, and then I'm going to come down to the pending actions, and there's several buckets. It starts out as active while it's routing for the approval process. It then goes to pending, and it could automatically update HRMS immediately if you wanted to. So I've saved that. Now, that's done. So let's go back and look at that report, custom details, the COVID vaccine status, and that third or fourth record down for Veronica Bell should be indicating that she got the booster shot yesterday. So that's just a real quick way you can extend HRMS into or to accommodate external realities as they pop up in our lives.
Very cool. And I think you got a little glimpse there of what core HRMS was right? That employee, if you will, employee-centric database, tons of fields for each employee and navigation with those tabs across the top. But now I want to dive in and start with the typical employee lifecycle, which is recruiting and onboarding. So I want to talk first about onboarding. So you've hired someone, and you're probably doing that with a paper application, or maybe you have a web-based form. We'll get to that kind of in a second. And then you go to hire them. Well, you typically start with a paper-based new hire packet, and then you enter data manually, perhaps into your payroll system, for those of you who said you use payroll to track some of your demographics. Well, out of the box, Sage HRMS lets you take that data, and instead of putting it, say, in payroll or spreadsheets, you're going to put it in Sage HRMS. And they even have a thing on the side called workflows or tasks that can guide you through some typical things. One of those typical things is recording a new hire. They also have a return to hire. Let's say someone left and you're bringing them back. You use those tabs. You can even use those tabs to update employee status. But the workflow guides you on what you need to enter. You can even get a checklist to help expedite and standardize the process. You can even create to-dos or tasks, and they can be scheduled for a future date or even scheduled for another person. But I want to talk with you about leveling up. So this is what I call it when you add another module that suddenly gives you tons more capabilities. Let's say you do a ton of recruiting. Well, you might want to get an applicant tracking system. And there are two that work exceptionally well with Sage HRMS. iRecruit, that's cloud-based, and Cyber Recruiter, which is cloud-based or on-prem. But you really can use any applicant tracking system, and they should plug in just nicely into this Sage ecosphere. Then you add Sage HRMS HR Actions, and that has a new hire form. So instead of using that task over in Sage HRMS, you can fill out a form, a web-based form. It will route for approval. They get hired into HRMS, and then that web-based form will be the first artifact in their online personnel file. You add the new hire interface. Well, now that connects that applicant tracking system over to that new hire form. So you don't have to type anything in, cut and paste between two systems. The applicant tracking system gives them an online application. When you say they're ready to hire, it'll flow right into that new hire form. And it interfaces with pretty much any applicant tracking system using a REST API or a CSV file kind of import-export model. Let's say you don't do enough hiring that you really need an applicant tracking system, but putting on your website, email HR at whatever, if you're interested in working for us, or you have a simple little web form that IT created. Well, HR Actions is all about building forms. So we have a little gizmo, an add-on there called Basic Online App that lets you build a basic online application. It's just a simple form you can plop right on your website. Now your website has its own little job board. And of course, that flows right into that new hire form. So some best practices there that we want to think about is, number one, your new hire process, where you can integrate that, your applicant tracking system, a form even on your website, our basic online app, right into the new hire form. Get that data right into Sage HRMS. It's going to flow right into payroll. So that handles setting up everything in payroll, yet all your core employee information is mastered, single point of truth, in Sage HRMS. Usually when you hire someone, you end up telling folks, who knows who. Maybe you're telling IT, hey, they should have access to these network drives. Maybe you want to make an announcement and post their phone number, their email address, who knows what. Well, there's a tool, a module that'll do that. It's called Sage Alerts and Workflow. I like to think of it as yoo-hoo. It'll send email, it'll send text messages. It can even point to multiple data sources. It lets you know when things happen, when you see things happen in the data that you want to be notified about. Then an employee has to get on to self-service. You don't even have to create that login. They can do it themselves. And then you can give them their whole onboarding packet through self-service, paperless. In fact, you can give them the right forms at the right time. So depending on their location, they may get a different W-4 form, or maybe not even the state one at all. I-9, policy agreements, you name it. These forms can even have embedded videos, so you can take advantage of multimedia over the web. And of course, since it's all online, it's real easy to monitor the progress, just like you track shipping on Amazon.com. So Brian, can you give us an idea of how that works?
Absolutely. So the first thing I'll do here is, let's just go over to a new tab, and I'm going to get into the basic online application. Because if you're going to have a recruiting solution of any sort, one of the steps in the process will be to flag the person you're recruiting as to, hey, they're ready to be hired. We've made the decision to hire, they've accepted, so let's get them over into the HRMS database. So this is an example of basic online application. And I have 3 job postings. This has an applicant count, and we're going to hire somebody who's applying for the machine operator 1 today. So if I go over here, and I can see Joe has applied for the job. So this is what I was indicating. Somehow you have to mark in your applicant tracking system, hey, these people are ready to get hired. And when I do that, then that tells HR Actions to go out, look for this data, and pull it down and populate an applicant table. So let's go ahead and get into HR Actions. So this is the administrative view of HR Actions. It has reporting, the admin part, and also self-service. The self-service piece also displays, and you'll see this in a few moments, within the employee self-service module. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull up, start an action for somebody else, and I'm going to put in their supervisor. So pick somebody out here, and I'm going to make this person report to somebody in manufacturing, perhaps, let's do Clint Eastwood as his manager. And then I'm going to do a new hire form, and I'm going to pick the form that we've associated with that particular basic online application. Now, when I launch this form, normally a new hire form, you just have to come in, you have to key in all the information, just like you would in Sage HRMS. But here, I've got this pick list called applicant. So no matter which applicant tracking system, if you're interfacing it up to HR Actions, once you mark that person is ready to hire, then we'll display those people in this list. So I'm going to pick this individual, Joe, and when I do, it will populate all the information that came in with that was captured in his application.
So if you don't want to, if you're still doing paper forms or whatever, crawl, walk, run, that you would just type all this in with the paper form, clipped to your monitor. But when you level up, this is where you can connect this to however you get your application, and everything just flows right in, right?
That's exactly right. And then as you're seeing me do now, you can augment the information, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say he's going to start right away. It's a quick hire. And we'll give him some salary information. So I'm just going to put in his rate, and it fills out the rest of the pay period salary, annual salary automatically. And let's see, I want to make sure that he is in the manufacturing department, and that his division, I think that's operations, and he's going to be in the location of San Francisco. All right, now, so if I go ahead and initiate this action, and if any required fields weren't filled out, it would let me know. But now that's routing for the approval process. So real quickly, I'm not going to walk you through the entire approval process, but HR has has visibility to see where actions are in the process. And in a paper-based world, this is pretty novel. Once you're electronic, you can do this quite easily. So here's the new hire form we just did. There's 3 hires, but just because today I can, I'm going to route these or bypass these 3 approvers. The president said hire Joe right away. So I'll click that. That comment will get emailed to any of the approvers I just overrid their approval process. Then it's going to go to pending. Now, this is sort of active actions are floating and routing the organization. Pending means, hey, they've arrived at HR. And then I can come through and I can save this to HRMS. But you can also set it up so that actions save immediately to HRMS right after they're submitted or approved, right? So now, we've gone through the hiring process. We've taken their data from the applicant tracking. We put it in a new hire form. It's routed for approval. We've saved it to HRMS. If you have Sage HRMS Payroll, the data the employee has been added to both Payroll and HRMS. But let's look at this from employee self-service perspective. So we're going to log in to self-service, and Joe's a new hire, so he's not in self-service. So we've got to get him into self-service. And we, as the name implies, employees can sign up on their own. So if I go do this, I can come through here. I wouldn't put in the login and password. I'm going to say I'm a first-time user. And when I do that, I put in the name. I have to, now that's obviously ridiculously simple. You'd put in the last 4 of their social, their birth date, some other personally identifiable information so that you know it's them. They have to give themselves a security question, actually a minimum of 1, but up to 5. And then it's going to say, okay, what do you want your password, your login and password to be? And I'll give myself a password, save. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's okay. We'll try giving you a different name. Okay. It's going to display self-service, and because this is Joe's first day on the job, it's not going to display much.
And Brian, it doesn't even have to be my first day on the job. Technically, you could let somebody access this and begin their whole onboarding process before their official first day of work, right? So that they don't have to spend time the first day of work doing this kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely. And something went awry. So I'm just going to log in as a different user real quick. Somebody else who's also just started, L Woods. That's not the right password. It's L Woods. There we go. So L is also a new hire today. And when we go into self-service, it's pretty scant, right? There's no time off. There's no current benefits because they haven't even enrolled in benefits yet. But what they will have is something called My Required Actions. So this replaces that paper-based checklist, right? So here, this person's already been in and started it. So I can edit the federal W-4, right? So this is one of the many forms that we might put in our checklist. And as the employee, I can go down and say I'm single and or married, filing separately. And I could say, you know what, I'm going to add $10 of extra withholding a pay period. And then I can sign it electronically. And when I do that and I click Save Draft and Continue, it will populate the W-4. So this information, if you're using Sage HRMS Payroll, all this information will flow over to the US Fit. If you're using Sage 300 Payroll, it'll flow over as well. If you're using Sage 100 Payroll, it will flow over through a VI job as well over into the US federal income tax. So if I go ahead and initiate that action, the users are able to just continue on down their forms. Let's look at the I-9 form real quick. So here, there's two ways you can start an I-9. The I-9 can be started by the individual who's going to complete section 1, or you could just have the person who's going to complete section 2 help the person complete section 1 as a preparer translator, right? So this is an example of where the employee would come in and say, I'm a citizen. They put in their electronic name, their signature. They click continue, put a date. They'd say I did not have anybody help me. And then when they go down to the bottom of the page and initiate, or I'll just say save draft and continue so you can see it, it will then take all of that information and populate the I-9 form, at least section 1 of the I-9 form. Okay, so if I jump down to the form, you can see I've got the last name, first name, and more importantly is anything that was left blank has that very important NA, so you don't get dinged on an audit, and then the electronic signature and time. Then later, the person who's examining the documents, they'll come in and they'll fill out the documents themselves. They'll do their little certification, and then that will populate section 2. All right. So that's a real quick look at the onboarding process, Joe.
Very cool. Now, of course, two things you have to handle once you bring somebody on board is managing their benefits and, of course, their compensation. I'm going to start with benefits management. Out of the box, core HRMS tracks benefits like premium costs and employee contributions, coverage amount, beneficiaries, your dependent coverage, COBRA. Again, we want to keep that employee data here in Sage HRMS and then share it over to Payroll so Payroll knows what to do, paycheck wise. But this way, when we have the benefits information combined with all the demographic information, we really can do some amazing reporting. We also have built-in ACA compliance. You can proactively monitor compliance with My Workforce Analyzer. It'll even generate your 1094C and 1095C forms. And Brian mentioned briefly payroll integration. Well, HRMS will know about deductions and contributions. It'll pass that over to payroll. It even handles taxable excess life, which we need to track because it's imputed income. For reporting, well, out of the box, you have standard reports that come with Sage HRMS, even a total compensation letter. But if you want to level up, go that next step, well, now we're talking about Sage HRMS Employee Self-Service, ESS. That'll let someone see their current enrollments. It'll even give them links to plan documents and carriers. You can also add some robust compensation letters that were built by Delphia. They're little add-ons we have. And if you really want to get into web-based dashboards and reports, analytics, well, that's Sage HRMS HR Analytics. We can even handle arrears management. So benefit arrears is a report inside of HR Analytics. It outputs a catch-up deduction file. It's just a CSV file based on rules. And then Sage HRMS Time and Labor Import can import that deduction file right into the time cards. Reporting out of the box, you have paper-based, manual data entry, right? That's when you're trying to get into open enrollment. Well, you can level up in self-service. You can add Sage HRMS benefits enrollment. That'll handle open enrollment and even life events. Of course, it'll update the person's selections in Sage HRMS. Then you have to get that data over to your carrier. You can do it by hand, or you can use Sage HRMS Benefits Messenger. That will transfer the enrollment changes over to the carrier. Let's say you're using a third-party website or portal for people to make benefit selections. Well, today, you probably have to upload demographics to that portal, let them know who can select benefits and that sort of thing. Then people go through the process through that really nice portal and they make their selections and talk about dependents and dependent selections. The portal is going to tell your carrier, so that's done. But somehow you have to get it back down to you so that you can update payroll. Well, we have benefit portal interface. That's a bi-directional interface. It'll provide the portal with that demographic information to get the process started. And then it'll take the employee selections, their list of dependents and their dependent selections, update Sage HRMS. Now you know how to update payroll because those things are connected. So Brian, can you show us a little bit about benefits enrollment or life changes and what's that like? And I think your mic cut out.
No, didn't unmute myself. So I'm going to go ahead and get into employee self-service. I'm going to log in as our favorite demo person here, VBell. And we're going to go through the, come on, log in.
Now, can you show me briefly before we even make any changes, where does this go in HRMS? Isn't there a place for benefits right in
Well,
HRMS?
sure, yeah. I'll go ahead and log into that. That sometimes hides itself in the background.
Oh, I thought you had it open. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't. But I'll go ahead and log in. We'll come back and look at it in a sec. Okay. So if you have the benefits enrollment module, then at that wonderful time of the year, you have the open enrollment. You also have life events. So a new hire would be going through basically open enrollment, but say it was a life event. So you have the ability to have a message screen. These benefits are going to take effect on 1/1/2022. And you just follow the little arrows to go to the next step. It's going to walk you through, okay, these are all the choices. We have a lot of benefits to select from: medical, dental, vision, flex spending, optional life for the employee, for the spouse, right? So we'll just walk the wizard. The first one is, what do I want to make, how do I want to select my medical benefit, right? Do I want a high deductible plan, or do I want a PPO? Is it for employee only, or if it's for myself and dependents, then I'm going to check off which dependents I want to do. And then if or I can waive the plan, right? So I'll just continue on. Now it's giving me a warning that I don't have social security numbers. So I don't have to fix that right now, but I will need to fix that for ACA reporting to be proper. If I click next, it's going to take me over to dental. I can either waive my coverage or select the dental, and I'll again, maybe my spouse has a good dental plan at his work, so I don't need to cover him, but I'm going to cover the kids. So if I do that, I can update the cost. You'll notice that number up top there should change ever so slightly, went down by a couple of bucks. So you get the basic idea here. You go through each of your plans. You can be presented with one plan and a waiver, or multiple plans and a waiver, and are your dependents going to be covered? So I'm just going to go ahead and click to go to the benefit summary. So at the end of the process, it's going to give me a summary of what the employer cost, my contribution is going to be. I can go back and edit any one of these things. I can go back, and I could also click here to finish. So if I think I'm done, then I can come in and say I am finished, in which case I have to do a log into the system again with my social security number, so nobody's going to be completing open enrollment by accident. Or I could say, you know what, I'm not finished, and just come back later. So that's the open enrollment experience. Life events is really similar. Real quickly, one other thing we can do here is within, if you're in that mode of using a third-party portal, maybe arranged by your broker, very often they're going to be able to give you a file that's saying, here's all the results of the enrollments. We're going to be able to pick up that file, import it. It will then display all of the benefit plans that people are enrolling in and what the premium amounts are. You can validate the data, which this is the perfect answer, no validation issues found. And then you can actually load it into HRMS. And then when you do that over here, and for all the employee records in HRMS, it tracks the person. It tracks all there is to know about their benefits, their insurance plans, their 401k or savings plans. These are all of the current plans and all the details that were either imported from the carrier or added through the open enrollment process. But you can also look at all the historical information as well. So Sage does a wonderful job of managing benefits all the way through to the ACA reporting, as well as integrating over to any of the Sage payrolls. So Joe, let's go back to you.
So we talked about benefits. Of course, next we have to talk about compensation. Out of the box, Sage will let you track things like next pay review date, even a performance review date, even your pay grades. And then of course it's got basic compensation information. Brian can show us some of that. And then you can level up, right? You can ensure timely pay increases with email reminders. That's coming from Yoo-hoo, alerts and workflow. You can even assign managers a form or multiple forms to say, hey, it's time for a salary review. Here's a pay change form. You can do the pay review due report. And of course, then we actually have that pay change form. So Brian, can you give us an idea of what compensation management is like when we're using Sage HRMS?
Sure can. So let's go back into HR actions. Actually, I'm in some self-service. I'll just do it here. Let me go ahead and just cancel out of this form I was in.
And did HRMS come up that you can show us briefly how that comp data is stored just in HRMS out of the box?
Sure. Let me, there we go. There it is.
See, I have to throw you off track. It keeps you on your toes.
You do a good job of that. Okay, so one of the things that we have the ability to do here is as a, and I'm in the wrong person. I have to log out, and log back in. I'm going to go in as Veronica Bell. So Veronica's a manager. She has several people reporting to her. So employee has several roles: the employee role, the manager role, the administrator role. Veronica's VP of HR, so she has the administrative role too. But let's focus on manager. And under manager, we have required checklists for managers. So here I have a salary change that's due for Barbara Smith. So I can go ahead and create that form, and it will have an effective date and all of the information. You can see this is what it is in HRMS right now and what I'm changing it to. So here, if I come through and let's give this person an increase to say $25 an hour, you'll notice that all of the other fields that are related to the salary change, as that equates to a 15.55% raise. Notice that the effective date automatically defaulted to the effective date at the top of the form, making it a little bit easier to manage. And we're able to see where this person is in my very outdated salary grades. It will tell me their compa ratio as well. So if I'm happy with that, I can simply click initiate, and that's going to route people on over to for approval. Now, let's go ahead and get into HR analytics, because I want to show you some of the reporting capabilities available to help manage compensation. HR analytics is nice because traditionally reports in an HR system are sort of limited to goodness, I'm not sure what just happened there. Reports in a system are limited. What database am I on here? I'm in Sage Demo, that's right. Hold on. Let me just close out of this and get back in. Okay, let's try that again. The reports under Sage HRMS Analytics, though, are available to managers as well. So it really gets HR out of the report. We're running reports for other people. These are available on demand. And the user can simply switch their roles. I'm in as an administrator right now, but I could just as easily switch to manager, and I'd only see the 4 people that report to me. Let's look at this pay review due date. This is showing you based on the due date of the next review in HRMS, who's ready for a review. And what's nice about this is I have some pretty old data here with some next reviews being somewhat past dated. But if I click on this hyperlink over here, I can just, without having to switch systems, I can log right into the compensation form to manage the salary increase for that particular person. So that's in a real quick overview is how we can manage compensation in a paperless way.
And Brian, did you get to show where those performance data is saved right in HRMS?
Oh, I knew you were going to do that. So that's why I have it up and running here. So if I pull up an individual, and I'll just pull the first person on the list here. So we have the ability under job and pay to track the current pay. Of course, all this information flows over to the payrolls and their performance information. And while I'm here, we also track their jobs and their job and pay history. So this is where it all flows to.
Perfect. So another thing we want to talk about as part of the employment lifecycle is performance management. Now, out of the box, we have basically paper-based manual data entry, right? You build a performance review form and it does whatever you do today, and Sage HRMS will track those 3 dates. Of course, you can level up with Sage HRMS HR Actions. You can even get progressive with Maviva. So there are really 2 types or 2 approaches to performance management. The traditional one, this is somewhat top down, it's very linear, it's somewhat static. This is where you set goals and then you set them and forget them and probably come back 6 months later for the mid-year review, then set them and forget them, and then come back 6 months later for the end of the year review. You establish those objectives early in the cycle, present it to employees, and you somewhat monitor progress, but that's a very traditional approach. A more progressive approach is called continuous performance management. This is more agile. It's very flexible, and you can add goals at any time, change goals, pause goals. You really set goals in kind of a collaborative setting, but it's based on continual feedback and coaching, kind of like school, where you always got feedback because you got little grades along the way and quizzes and reports, things like that, and real-time conversations about your goals. Now, HR Actions and Sage HRMS really supports both approaches. The traditional approach, let's talk about how you fill out a performance review form in that approach. The form is built with HR Actions. Remember, that's the form tool, the web-based form tools Brian's been showing you. You can initiate that by the employee. If you want to do self-reviews, then it goes to the manager, or just start with the manager. They can add more questions to it. They have comment boxes and ratings, and they can bounce it back and forth until the manager says, I'm good to go. It'll do the little workflow or routing slip at the bottom of the form, and then when you're done, you can update Sage HRMS. The progressive approach is similar, but it uses another module called Maviva that you use to set the goals, track the progress, capture those comments. That's that ongoing part. Then that flows right in just like the traditional form, but you can do the form anytime you want, 30 days, 90 days, 6 months, every week if you wanted. So I asked Brian if he would first show us the traditional approach, then we'll look at the Maviva approach.
I'm in self-service, so I'm going to go in as a manager, and I've already got a performance appraisal that has been partially completed here. So this review has both a manager and an employee self-evaluation component. So we can see that there'll be a manager comment, an employee comment, a manager rating, and an employee rating. So if we look at this form, this section, this darker block here, this is called this section. You can have up to 20 sections. Sections can be weighted. Sections will track the employee and the manager scoring overall. Then within a section, you can have as many questions as you want. There's 80 questions in total that you can add to a form. Gosh, help the employee who has 80 questions to answer. But here's where, this is customer service. The employee has already done their rating and the manager can do their rating. Your weighting of the questions and the sections can be either closed, HR has determined it, or you can leave it open for the manager to adjust things on the fly. So in my performance relative to competencies, I think I have about 6 or 7 questions. Then I have another one that's relative to goals. Now, in this case, this is an open question. This must be the case where they didn't use this last year. So the first time they're going to use it, they're going to put in the goal. And then there's a little plugin that you can use to carry over the goals to the mid-year reviews or next year reviews as well. But again, same concept, you rate it, and the employee has already done their piece. We're looking at this as the manager. So speaking of the employee and the manager and the employee can send the performance appraisal back and forth between them. So The manager might start it out, send it to the employee can do their thing, manager can still work on his version of it, employee sends it back to the manager. We can also request multi-rater feedback so that the manager has some additional information as a basis for his opinion. So, and then of course there's an overall performance appraisal as well. So that's a real quick, highly configurable, traditional approach to performance management.
Cool. Now, when we talk about progressive performance management, this is where we introduce Maviva into the picture. So Maviva is a web-based tool that you use ongoing. I hate to say throughout the year because it makes it sound like there has to be this cycle thing, but you set goals, you track progress, and then most importantly, as a manager meets with a team member, they capture their comments on each goal. And those comments are going to flow right into the performance appraisal form, just like in the traditional approach. You can set up a person's job description, goals, even competencies and values. All of that information is dynamically created right on the performance appraisal form. So we're going to focus now on that progressive approach and just a little bit more information here about Maviva. This is really all about setting goals, doing those check-ins, and then periodically spinning off that circle to produce the artifact, the actual performance review doc. But this process takes place on an ongoing basis. You're setting near-term goals. Those goals can even be set to align with other goals. Sometimes you hear it as cascading goals. You can even align a goal to competencies and values. You can align goals to the job description. You have those regular check-ins. That's the key, because that ongoing coaching is really there to increase the probability that the end result will meet your expectations. And then HR Actions produces that artifact as often as you'd like. So Brian, how about a glimmer into progressive performance management?
Absolutely. And boy, is it a whole lot simpler than the traditional approach, because you've already put in the effort. You've already met with the employee and documented your conversations in a very social environment within the Maviva application. And then using HR Actions to create that artifact allows the reviewer to really pull in all that data that was captured throughout the year. So I'm going to go ahead, I've identified who the subject of this review is, and I'm going to use a particular form, if I can find it. There we go, all sections, where I'm using my Maviva integrated form. So I click submit. Now, the form itself, at first glance, it's not going to look too dissimilar than what we just saw, right? We've got questions, we've got sections, we've got weighting, right? But here, I'm going to be able to say, well, what period of time am I evaluating? So we'll just do all of 2020 or 2020. And when I put in those dates and I click away, it goes out and thanks. And what it's doing is it's going out to that Maviva continuous performance management system and sucking in all the data that has been entered in all year. So the first section is just a job description. How did I do based on my job? And then these sections come in from Maviva automatically. Individual goals, these are goals that are assigned to me. I'm the owner of them. It's going to give me what the goal details are, whether I've met them or not. All of the comments that have been made throughout the year will be listed here, so I can wordsmith this and edit it, or I can just leave it exactly as is. I can go ahead and rate this individual. So I'll have as many goals listed under my individual goals as I actually have goals in the system that are marked as being included in a performance appraisal. The next thing we have is company goals. These are goals that are not just owned by me, but they're goals that everybody's accountable for. The details come in from the system as well. And then one of the really cool things about Maviva is that it associates goals with competencies. So rather than just say, well, how do they do on this competency without any basis? Now here's a competency, but there are no goals associated with them. If the accountability competency had been flagged as being associated with goals, those goals will be listed here. And then there's values, and you can associate goals with values. And then other than that, it works about the same as the traditional format, but a whole lot less data entry.
Very cool. Now, if you're interested in learning more about Maviva, we have a webinar next Thursday that you're welcome to join us at. And if you download the handout for today's webinar, it's over there in the handouts portion of the GoToWebinar control panel. This slide, that link is clickable, so you could always register. We'll try to include information about this when we do our follow-up as well. So we covered a lot in just about an hour, and hopefully you got a good kind of big picture view of what Sage HRMS is like. It's again a best of breed platform, and you select the modules that meet your needs. And Brian gave us a nice overview of all the different things that can be covered when we cover the entire employment lifecycle with all our employee data in one place, starting with Sage HRMS, the core of this whole ecosphere, to manage all of your human capital needs. And again, BrainSell is your key to success in this environment. So with that, let's just see if anyone's interested in continuing the conversation. I'm going to pop up a quick poll here. And if you'd like to schedule a time to help us learn what your goals are for HR software, what is your biggest pain points? What is it you're trying to accomplish? What's working the way you're doing it today? What's not? How does it integrate with your existing software? We're happy to reach out with you. Just let me know. Yes, you'd like us to schedule a time to talk, or maybe you're not sure, or not right now. No worries at all. So if you just let me know your opinions, this makes it a lot easier than us tracking you down. That would be great. About half of you have given me your thoughts, so let me know what you're thinking. I'm going to close out this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So with that, we'll see if we have any more questions in the couple minutes we have remaining. I think you might have someone out there, Stephanie, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so for the sake of time, we're actually gonna move through the question and answer. So if you do have a question, please feel free to email growth@braincell.net. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And again, if you want to schedule a demo of Sage HRMS, you can also contact your CSM over at BrainSell or contact growth@braincell.net to schedule that demo. And I just wanted to thank you all. Thank Joe and Brian for doing this with us. Thank you guys for joining us. I hope you guys learned a lot, and I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.